Nebraska is coming off of a tough 6-24 loss to the Minnesota Golden Gophers. Meanwhile, the Northwestern Wildcats, who Nebraska plays this Saturday, shut out Purdue 19-0 and have been putting on great efforts in the ground game, running the football, and on defense. That's what happens when you pitch a shutout. Your defense gets praised. Regardless of that, Nebraska is power rated higher. They are an 8.5-point favorite against Northwestern this Saturday, and I'm going to give you 10 reasons why Nebraska should beat Northwestern. I picked Nebraska to win. Before I continue, liking the video, watching the video all the way through, and commenting your thoughts down below are the best ways to support the channel, as they help push me into the algorithm, help me to receive a larger paycheck that I can use to reinvest in producing elite analysis for you all. Subscribing to the channel, hitting the notification bell, sharing the video around, and supporting us in other ways that you can find out via the description are other awesome ways to support our operation at College Football with Sam. We are becoming the best. We want to be the best. Thank you all for making that possible. In my Nebraska versus Northwestern preview and prediction video, link to that will be down below in the pinned comment. And I will also release, around the time I release this video, the pathway for Northwestern to win. So the link to that when released will also be down below in a reply to the pinned comment. But let's get right to it. And reason number 1 through 5 we'll go over first, and then look at 6 through 10. So number 1 is Nebraska's adjustments. I believe that Nebraska's staff will respond to the Minnesota game accordingly. There were some weird adjustments made where John Butler admitted to changing the defensive scheme mid-game after one play, one long run, and honestly, it was blocked well on the right side of Minnesota's O-line where the play was going, but on the left side, the play got somewhat blown up, and Darius Taylor was almost shoestring tackled in the backfield. If better angles were taken, that would have been a 4 or 5 yard gain, or maybe even stopped the lines of scrimmage if Nebraska's defensive tackle got off his block a millisecond earlier. Minnesota offensively didn't really gash Nebraska all that much. They had some wins, yes, but it was no different from Maryland putting up 30 points. And Maryland's offense is probably worse than Minnesota's, honestly. That game had a lot more to do with the offense, and maybe some of that was adjustments in terms of the staff on them. But the players, too, they just got outplayed and punked on the offensive line, and Raiola, I think, got punked, too. So adjustments, not just from a staff standpoint, but a mindset standpoint, I think are going to set in here. So that's reason number 1, and I think that is a pretty big reason. Usually I would have it lower among the reasons, but Rhule's a better coach than any coach Nebraska's had recently, and they've disappointed before, made adjustments, and roared back, especially at home. Think of the Wisconsin game last year where they won, I think, 44-25. Kind of get a similar feeling here with how the players and staff are talking about this game and how Nebraska and its fans were talking about this game. Number 2 is the superior QB play. So Dylan Raiola is better than Preston Stone in just about every possible metric. Preston Stone is pretty mediocre. Dylan Raiola, meanwhile, is one of the 25 best quarterbacks in America. I know the QBR won't say that, and I kind of fell into that same trap this week, but after I talked about one of my confidants, someone who I usually try to check my opinions with, I've jumped back on the idea that, yeah, Raiola's much better than he was last year, and he's a great QB. His problem is the offensive line is really bad, and one of the few weaknesses he happens to have is he holds onto the ball too much. That's a really bad combination. If the O-line were better, you would not notice him holding onto the football a ton. It's more of an O-line problem than a him problem. The O-line is forcing him to be ahead of schedule in development, and he's probably as ahead of his schedule as you can get, being a true sophomore without an amazing supporting cast like Trevor Lawrence had or Julian Sayin currently has. He doesn't even have close to the same supporting cast Bryce Underwood at Michigan does, and they're limited. So I want to give Raiola some grace here. He's performed very well so far this season, and Preston Stone has 10 touchdowns, 7 picks, and a 124 passer rating. Preston Stone's QBR is outside of the top 90. It's 100th in America. Against Tulane and Oregon, he threw 7 interceptions, or 6 of them. He threw a pick against Purdue and didn't even complete 50% of his throws. And yes, he had an okay game against Penn State, but Penn State has quit on the season, and they have ever since that Oregon game. So I don't really take a lot of stock into that. Raiola has a 162.6 passer rating, 16 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and a 65.2 QBR, which is 62nd. And sacks take a toll on QBR, probably more than they should be. A lot of the sacks are on Raiola's fault, yes, but I do think that the offensive line exaggerates a lot of that stuff. Number 3 is the superior roster for Nebraska. They have better players, and they're rated higher from a power ratings angle on both sides of the football, and that matters. It does. If you have the top-down superior roster, you need a matchup advantage if you're the inferior team to have even a shot at winning. And Northwestern has some of those, but it's a good start for Nebraska that their roster's just straight up better. Number 4 is, thanks in part to adjustments, but also what I've seen from Nebraska this year, their tackling will be better in this game than it was against Minnesota. Their overall team performance was the worst it's been all year in that Minnesota game, by far. So I think there will be some regression to the mean this year where their best game of the year was probably against Michigan or Cincinnati, was their best game. And last Friday was their worst. There will be some regression to the mean where I think they play more likely did against Michigan State or Maryland or against their lesser opponents. Northwestern, talent-wise, is probably closer to Akron than about half of the Power 4 Big Ten teams that, or Power 4 teams in general, whether Big Ten or Cincinnati, that Nebraska's played. So I think you'll see improvements in fundamentals, and you'll notice that Nebraska is the better team, whether or not they win or lose. For number 5, it's Emmett Johnson, 119 carries for 713 yards and 7 touchdowns. He will be a 1,000-yard back this year. He's averaging over 100 rushing yards per game. He's been absolutely phenomenal. He's averaging 1 rushing touchdown per game. He is carrying this offense in large part because he also has, I believe, around 200 receiving yards and a handful of receiving touchdowns too. He is a big reason why here, because Northwestern, in theory, should be able to have some matchup edges on the line of scrimmage, their D-line and linebacker core versus Nebraska's offensive line. But Northwestern is not perfect on the defensive front. They do not have really a good overall defense, though it's shown some signs of progress. It is scrappy, and they do a good job of controlling the controllables. But just from a talent angle, Emmett Johnson's probably more talented than anyone on that Northwestern defense. And that can matter for busting a play for a touchdown when you need it most. Reasons number 6 through 10, starting off with the cornerbacks. Sear Wright and Andrew Marshall have been a blanket this year. Nebraska is still top 10 in yards allowed per pass attempt and passing yards allowed per game. They're top 25 in expected points added allowed per pass attempt. They have done a good job in the secondary, reloading and upgrading compared to where they were last year. Now, the early metrics, and I had a suspicion of this, called it on the Michigan State game, was wrong, but I was early because it reared its ugly head against Minnesota. They are not an elite secondary. Minnesota showed that, I think, in part. But they are really good and much closer to the top of America there than the bottom. Much closer. It also helps that Nebraska can't really get pass rush, where as some other teams Minnesota has played, they will be playing Iowa, who can rush the passer effectively, and Ohio State can generate a pass rush, and it's also just much faster and more talented on defense than Nebraska is. Nebraska's secondary isn't the problem. It wasn't even the problem outside of really the tackling and angle element against Minnesota. A lot of that's lines of scrimmage stuff, which is why you're not seeing the O-line or D-line as any of these reasons here. The cornerbacks and the safeties, I think, are going to tackle better, and Northwestern does not have, outside of Griffin Wilde, who's an incoming transfer wide receiver from the FCS, I do not think they will have the same type of passing offense trying to attack them and potentially beating them at points that Minnesota did. So the secondary should do a good job locking down this Northwestern passing attack. It really is going to come down to the trench play. If Northwestern wins, it will be because they bullied Nebraska so badly at the lines of scrimmage and controlled the clock with such precision, similar to what they did against Penn State, although they didn't bully Penn State in the trenches. They just controlled the clock, forced some turnovers, which, now that I think about it, should actually be scary, because if they can beat Penn State on the road, they could probably beat Nebraska on the road by 10 if they win the turnover battle and win the trenches. But this is why Nebraska should win, and I am picking them to win. And even if Northwestern wins at the lines of scrimmage, Nebraska has the receivers to score like that. Pretty bad snap attempt. They have the receivers, so Ja'Cory Barney and Isaiah Hunter, and they have Dane Key, to, against a secondary of this talent, which not as talented as the Minnesota secondary, the Michigan one, the Cincinnati one, etc. They should be able to get down the field, and they should be able to score. Whether it's field goals, hopefully touchdowns. I don't think Northwestern is going to do a ton of scoring here, so just getting down the field will help. Number 9, another area where you're struggling, it looks like you're going to lose, and the season will fall apart. And then you make a long field goal to regain momentum entering halftime, or you return a punt or a kickoff, or you recover a fumble from a muffed punt or kickoff. Nebraska's special teams are among the nation's best. The unit has made 10 of 11 field goals and averages 39.3 yards per punt. And the reason the punting numbers, I think, are that low is that Nebraska usually does not get 3 and outs. So when they punt, they're usually doing it from midfield and trying to pin opponents inside the 20. And Archie Wilson has, I think, 6 punts pinned inside the 20, which is pretty good because Nebraska doesn't usually punt a ton. And when they do, they do a decent job at it usually. And number 10 is the home field advantage for the Cornhuskers. So Nebraska's at home, and there are some teams. It's the rare team that is as good on the road as they are at home. It's Ohio State last year, Michigan the year before. Some of the other Ohio State, Michigan teams of recent memory. That's LSU in 2019. That's the Georgia teams. You get the point. However, for Nebraska, and for most teams that aren't national champions, your home field advantage is a really big friend. Same for the championship teams. I mean, it's no coincidence that Ohio State's offense was really good against Oregon last year, but they still lost. The travel in Oregon Stadium had something to do with that. Yes. But especially for a team like Nebraska, where you're not a national title contender. So it's hard to overcome adversity because you're not going to have the same talent edge in every game that those teams do, nor do you have usually the same gumption or coaching. You're just not there yet. Hopefully one day you can get back there. Nebraska at home this year, beating Michigan State by 11, playing it closer with Michigan than the power ratings would suggest or like, and beating a Cincinnati team that on a true neutral field or at Cincy probably beats you. I can confidently say, especially looking at the Minnesota game, how that was the worst game Nebraska's played all year. It was probably the worst game Nebraska's played since last year against Indiana. It definitely was, or since the UCLA game last year. Nebraska at home beats, if not maybe beats handily, this Nebraska team when they play on the road. Memorial Stadium and the mentality of this team and the talent they have causes that combination to play favorably for Nebraska. So if this were on the road at Northwestern, on that, training facility, I would probably pick Northwestern here, especially since it's, the third straight road game. But it's at home. It's a return to Memorial Stadium. I like the home field advantage and what it can offer Nebraska here, and potentially the damage it could cause to Northwestern. Those are the 10 reasons why Nebraska should beat Northwestern. And reminder, I am picking Nebraska to win. They should win. This is the season for the Cornhuskers, and I think they're going to make the most of it. Thanks for watching this video. Make sure, if you haven't already, to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, comment your analysis and thoughts down below so I can reciprocate my thoughts with you in the comment section, and check out anything on these end screens that are up here. Whether it's a recommended video or playlists for teams that I'm talking about in a preview, prediction, or a reaction, make sure to hit the notification bell on those, scroll through them, and watch any suggested videos if you are interested. Thank you for helping College Football with Sam become the best and the biggest college football brand and channel on YouTube and other social media platforms. We will reach that one day because of your support.